I turned down my father's wedding invitation the moment I saw the guest list, and the reason was sitting right there, in bold letters, my ex, marked as a VIP guest. The message came from my father himself, short and cold. She's important to the family. You should be mature enough to attend. Important to the family. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. The same woman who had lied about me, humiliated me in front of relatives, and quietly torn apart every ounce of trust I still had with my father, was now apparently someone he wanted sitting in the front row. When I told him I wasn't coming, he didn't hesitate. "If you skip my wedding," he said over the phone, his voice hard as stone, "don't expect anything from me again. No support, no inheritance, nothing." The threat hung in the silence between us, but I still refused. Weeks later, curiosity pulled me to the reception hall anyway, just long enough to watch from the back. And when my father proudly introduced his new wife to the crowd, I couldn't stop myself from laughing. I grew up believing my father was the kind of man who valued loyalty above everything. That's what he always said anyway. Family stands together. Blood matters. But somewhere along the way, those words stopped including me. After my parents divorced when I was 16, my father changed. He became colder, more calculating, the kind of man who measured relationships the same way he measured business deals, by usefulness. If someone benefited him, they stayed close. If they didn't, they slowly disappeared. I learned early where I stood. When I started my first small business in college, he laughed and told relatives it was a cute hobby. When it quietly began, making real money, he suddenly acted as if my success reflected on him. Praise when it helped his image, silence when it didn't. Then there was her, my ex. My father adored her from the moment we started dating. She was charming, polished, and knew exactly how to flatter him. While I saw the cracks in private, the lies, the manipulation, he only saw the version she performed in front of him. When our relationship collapsed after I caught her betraying my trust, I expected my father to stand by me. Instead, he stayed close to her. Looking back, that should have told me everything I needed to know. But the wedding invitation made one thing painfully clear. To him, I was replaceable. The weeks leading up to the wedding were filled with small moments that felt harmless on the surface, but each one carried a quiet sting. My father began mentioning my ex casually during our short phone calls, as if nothing unusual had happened between us. "She's been very helpful with the wedding planning," he said one evening. His tone light, almost pleased. "You two were always good together." I didn't respond. I could hear clinking glasses and distant laughter on his end of the call. She was probably there with him. A few days later, a relative sent me a screenshot from the wedding website. The guest list was organized into sections: family, friends, business partners, and then there was a separate section labeled VIP guests. Her name sat there near the top. Mine wasn't listed anywhere. At a small family dinner the week before the ceremony, my father made another quiet remark while scrolling through his phone. "You should really reconsider coming," he said without looking up. "People will ask questions if my own son isn't there." Not because he wanted me there, because it would look bad if I wasn't. Across the table, my aunt gave me a sympathetic glance, but no one said anything. That was the pattern with my father. Nothing he did looked cruel in the moment, but when you stepped back, the message was unmistakable. The turning point didn't come with a fight or a dramatic argument. It arrived quietly, late one night. While I was staring at the wedding invitation again, gold lettering, perfectly printed names, a neat list of people my father considered important, enough to witness the start of his new life. My name still wasn't anywhere on it. Instead, there was a small handwritten note he had added at the bottom when he mailed it. "Don't make this difficult. For a long time, I used to believe if I explained myself clearly enough, my father would finally understand me. That if I showed him the truth about my ex, about what she'd done, he would choose his own son." But that night I realized something simple. He already had chosen, and it wasn't me. The next morning, he called again. His voice carried that familiar, controlled patience he used whenever he thought I was being unreasonable. "Have you decided yet?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. "I won't be there." The silence that followed felt colder than anger. "Then don't expect anything from me again," he said flatly. "If you walk away from this family, you walk away from everything." For the first time in years, his threat didn't scare me, because I had already decided something he didn't know. I wasn't losing anything. He was. After that call, I stopped trying to explain myself to anyone in the family. Silence was easier and more useful. For years, my father had assumed I was just the quiet one, the son who kept his head down, who didn't argue, who handled things calmly and stayed out of the spotlight. What he never seemed to realize was that quiet didn't mean passive. It meant observant. My father's wedding was being held at a luxury reception hall downtown, a place that catered mostly to corporate events and high-end celebrations. I knew it well because 2 years earlier, my company had signed a long-term service contract with them. My team handled their digital booking, systems and private client management software. The agreement wasn't something I thought much about at the time, just another client among many. But when I heard where the wedding would take place, curiosity made me review the schedule. Sure enough, my father's event was listed there. A private booking, fully paid weeks in advance. I didn't cancel anything. I didn't interfere with the event. Instead, I simply made sure everything would run exactly as scheduled. And then, the night of the wedding, I decided to stop by. Not as a guest, just an observer standing quietly near the back of the room. The reception hall glowed with warm lights and polished glass when I slipped inside. No one noticed me at first. The music was soft, the room filled with the low hum of polite conversation. Waiters moved between tables, carrying trays of champagne while guests admired the elaborate decorations my father had clearly spared no expense on. I stayed near the back wall just watching. My ex was easy to spot. She stood near the front tables, laughing with a group of relatives, as if she had always belonged there. Every now and then she glanced toward the entrance, probably expecting me to walk in and make a scene. I didn't. Eventually the lights dimmed slightly, and my father stepped onto the small stage at the center of the room. He looked confident, proud, exactly the way he always did when he believed everything was going according to his plan. He raised his glass to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for being here," he began, smiling broadly. "Tonight I want to introduce the incredible woman who has brought new happiness into my life." The room quieted with anticipation. Then he turned, gently guiding his new wife forward into the spotlight. For a moment I just stared at her face, and before I could stop myself, I started laughing. The sound slipped out before I could catch it. One sharp laugh that echoed louder than I expected. In the suddenly quiet room, heads turned. My father's smile froze halfway across his face as his eyes locked onto me standing near the back wall. For a second he looked confused, as if he couldn't quite process why I was there after everything that had been said. Then recognition hit. The guests began murmuring. Some glanced between my father, his new wife, and me, trying to understand the strange tension that had filled the room. But the most interesting reaction came from the front tables. My ex had gone completely still. Her confident smile faded the moment she saw who was standing beside my father on the stage, the woman he had just introduced. As his new wife shifted slightly, under the spotlight, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden attention. A few relatives exchanged uneasy looks, others leaned closer to whisper. My father had built his life on appearances, on the idea that everything around him was polished, respectable, perfectly under control. And now that image was cracking in front of everyone who mattered to him. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't exposing secrets. I was simply standing there, laughing at something only a few people in the room understood. Sometimes that's all it takes for the truth to become impossible to ignore. The laughter faded as quickly as it had come. I covered my mouth, shook my head once, and stepped back toward the exit before anyone could stop me. Behind me, the room was still buzzing with confusion. My father called my name once, sharp and irritated, but I didn't turn around. For years I had chased his approval, trying to prove I was worthy of being treated like family. That night made something clear I should have understood long ago. Approval from the wrong person isn't worth winning. Outside, the cool night air felt quieter than the crowded hall behind me. I could still hear faint music through the doors as they closed. I didn't stay to explain the joke. The truth would eventually reach everyone anyway. Some guests would realize that my father's new wife looked strikingly familiar because she had once been my ex's closest friend, the same person who had helped her hide the lies that ended my relationship. Others would start asking questions my father couldn't easily answer, but none of that mattered to me anymore. Walking to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Light. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone's life. It's calmly stepping out of it and letting their choices expose them on their own.